hello, and welcome to the Meet Mediocrity Podcast Season 4, Episode 5, continuing my series on things I wish I knew when I was starting my career. Today's episode is about making presentations. I wish I knew how to make a presentation when I first started my career. I didn't. I tended to write out a script. No matter who my audience was, I wrote out a script. I made sure I knew what I wanted to say and that I was prepared to say it well. And I usually came across as someone who is reading a script, not someone who is actually interacting with my audience. And I'm going to cover two types of presentations because there are two types of audiences. There are probably more than two, but I'm keeping it simple at two. Audience one is small group meetings. So you're in a meeting, you're presenting one-on-one, or you're presenting to a small group of people, maybe on a video chat or in a small conference room. The second type of presentation is when it's kind of one way. You're speaking to dozens or hundreds of people in a speech. Again, it could be in an auditorium, it could be on Zoom, but you're speaking really at a group of people. Both presentations are important. Both of them require some different areas of focus. So let me take them one at a time. When you're meeting one-on-one with a person or a small group of people, the first thing I would say is get your notes on one index card. And I would have that index card have 10 or fewer words on it. Why do I say that? Because you want to have a conversation. You don't want to be reading a script. How can you interact with someone one-on-one when you are reading a script? Here are some things when you're having those small group meetings that I would focus on in my presentation. I would focus on having a conversation, whether it's a selling meeting or even an informative meeting. You need to be focused on what does the receiver of your information want to get out of the information? What is in it for them? The other thing I would say is use stories. It's always good to use stories. If you can use a story to demonstrate an experience to your audience, they will relate to you, especially if it's a story they can relate to. The final thing I would say is practice. It's always good to practice your meetings. Get someone to play the client or your boss or your colleague and practice your meeting before you actually go to the meeting. So those are the tricks, and let me tell you a quick example. So I often see these small group meetings go poorly when the presenter starts speaking about how they're going to do the project or things they did to achieve a result or things that their product does from a functionality perspective. All right, I'm being very theoretical here. Let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story. Imagine if you were selling an iPhone. Do I have an iPhone here? My iPhone. There it is, with Molly, my doggie, on it. So imagine you're selling an iPhone to someone who's never had an iPhone. In fact, let's pretend they don't even have a smartphone. The types of presentations I've seen have the presenter say, this is an iPhone, and this iPhone is great. It has email on it. It has a calendar function and a to-do list. It even has a calculator so you can do math on your iPhone. It has 256 gigabytes of memory. It runs on an iOS operating system, and it even has apps for things like making airline reservations or dinner reservations. It can do everything. Pause. That is how I see iPhones and most meetings, small meetings go. Very one way, very, this is what I did or my product does. Imagine this meeting slightly differently. Imagine you walk in and you say, I'm going to talk to you today about an iPhone. Before I do that, I want to understand a little bit about things you do every day. So for example, when you make dinner or airline reservations, do you make phone calls? Do you do it on a computer? How do you keep your calendar? Do you keep a to-do list? Do you keep it on a piece of paper, on a wall calendar? Tell me a little bit about how you work every day, how you get your life done. And pause and let the person across the table speak. And then say, you mentioned that you do emails on your computer and you keep a paper calendar. and you always call the airline to make a reservation and you're frustrated that you're kept on hold. This iPhone can do all of those things much quicker, much better organized, and anywhere you are. So imagine this. Imagine that you're in a taxi or in a car heading for a meeting. You want to see whether you have an email from someone you were expecting to get that morning. You can open up your iPhone and read your emails from anywhere. And let's say you got an email that required that you have a meeting the next day. What you would do, based on what you just told me, is you would take out your paper calendar and you would write it in to block the time. On your iPhone, you can set your meetings right on your calendar. In fact, people can send you invitations to meetings that will show up right on your iPhone. So you never have to have a paper calendar. You never have to have crossouts or erasures on that paper calendar. It's all on this phone. And thirdly, airline reservations. You don't have to wait on hold because this iPhone has applications where you can make reservations whenever you want in real time on your phone. Let me walk you through the way you do those things. Is that interesting to you? Is that something you'd like me to show you? Pause. You see how different that meeting is? In that meeting, what you're doing is you are tying the functionality of the iPhone to the things that are important to the person across the table. And that could be a sales meeting, but that could also be giving a status update to your boss on a project you're doing. Frankly, it could be having dinner with friends, and instead of talking only about yourself, you're talking about yourself in the context of them, and you're talking about them, and you're keeping it two-way. You're keeping your conversation two-way by focusing on things you want to speak about in the context of the other person. And like I said before, telling stories and practicing is key. Now, I can go on and on about that, but suffice it to say, those key attributes can make your meetings much more effective and those presentations to small groups much more impactful to them. Now, things change when you're making a presentation to a big audience, and I'll never forget, I once made a presentation earlier in my career to a group of, at least it seemed like, hundreds of people at a training session. And you know that feeling when your face starts getting red and your throat starts choking up and you swallow and everyone hears you swallowing? That was me. I had a presentation, my first presentation in my career, to a couple of hundred people, and I was panicking. I got through it, but I got through it by plowing through my materials, speaking quickly, getting it over with. Everyone in the room was polite, and they said, "Very nice job, Mitch," but I knew it was panic mode, and I ran quickly through my materials. Not the best way to present to a large group. Let me give you a few pointers. Pointer 1. In this case, I would usually have a script. Now, there are instances where I might go a little bit off script, but I would generally have a script. The key is to organize your script. There's an old saying that I was taught when I was earlier in my career, and it said, when you prepare a script, the rule is tell the audience what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then conclude by telling them what you just told them. So it's a sandwich. Summarize, detail, summarize. Organize your script that way, and constantly remind your audience where you are in terms of the points you're making. So you start by saying, I'm going to tell you 3 things, A, B, and C. Let me go through them in detail. You start speaking about A. When you finish A, say, I just finished A, now I'm going to go into B. When you finish B, you say, I've got one more part, it's C. You tell them C. And then you wrap up by reminding them what A, B, and C were all about. Why is that important? Well, first of all, it's well organized. And when you're speaking to a big group of people, I can guarantee you no one's paying attention the entire time. They're looking at their phone. They're thinking about what's for lunch. They're thinking about, oh my gosh, my boyfriend yelled at me this morning, or my girlfriend was in a bad mood this morning. You can't win. You can't keep everyone's attention, but what you can do by being organized is you can constantly remind the audience where you are in your conversation, in your speech, in your points. And by doing that, it gets them to lock back in on your key points. And I have to tell you something. Look, content is important, of course. You can't have crappy content and have an effective presentation. But you can have great content and not organize it well, and it will get lost on an audience that's not always paying attention, or an audience that just may have a lot on their minds and needs help following along your points. So the organization makes great content superior content. And I have to tell you, I made a presentation at a big community group in my town. This is now probably 10 years ago. And I did it was the biggest presentation I ever made. There had to be almost 1,000 people there. And I had great content. And the speech was great, if I say so myself. But the thing I remember most is 1 week later, there was a guy who saw my speech, who I ran into on the train. His name was David. And David said to me, "Mitch, I loved your speech. And the thing I loved the most about it is you kept holding my hand through your points." He said, he used the word holding my hand through your points. And you told me the points you were going to make, and then you actually walked me through the details of making the points. Mitch, in fact, you were almost like an attorney going through a case and making opening comments and saying, "I'm going to prove to you these things," and then you walk through how you were going to prove them. And you did, and I appreciated it. I'll never forget that feedback. It made me feel really great, and it's a tool everyone can use. That organization, that speech writing for big groups that keeps everyone in sync with what you're doing. A couple of other points I would make. A, put your speech on paper with big font so it's easy to read. B, keep your finger on the speech so you know where you're at, and so you can look up and smile and make facial expressions at your audience, but not lose your space or your place on your speech. So big font, use your finger, and again, practice. You know, practice is probably the most underappreciated point of both of these things, whether it's making a presentation to a small group or a large group. I once put together a training course. It was about how to use improvisation in the course of selling. So how to use attributes of improv that actors and actresses do when selling in the business world. It's not about the class. The instructors of this course were actors and actresses who had now moved into the business world. And what impressed me the most as they were preparing for this training course that they were going to put on is how much they rehearsed and practiced. These are professional actors and actresses, and I couldn't believe it. And what they said to me is, A, the more they practiced, the more they got into the role. The more comfortable they were with what they had to say. And rehearsing could be fun because the audience, whoever they were rehearsing to, gave them feedback which made them better. So, I'll never forget that. And I would suggest that whether you're making a presentation to a small group or your boss, or whether you're making a speech to 1,000 people, practice. Practice, practice, practice. You can't practice enough. And by the way, most people hate it. They hate practicing, but practice. So this is my short summary video of the Meet Mediocrity Podcast, Season 4, Episode 5 on how to give presentations. And please continue to listen to the Meet Mediocrity Podcast. Please tell a friend. And until next time, stay safe, be positive, be healthy, and be well. Take care, everyone.